trials. And in the process, he develops or reveals a core set of personal attributes that allow him to save the princess and become the wise and just ruler by the end of the tale. Many of the stories my daughter and son loved best were from a series of books published in the early 20th century that included fairy stories and folk tales from all over the world. As I read them, I noticed that this pattern of attributes essential to becoming a leader was remarkably consistent across time and culture. It seemed to me that I had stumbled on an archetype. So as I read and continued to look for the common elements, I began to think about why this should be so, why human beings would have a built-in archetype for the qualities to look for in a leader. It occurred to me that until a few hundred years ago, the goal of most collections of people, villages, tribes, ethnic or religious groups, was much more clearly defined and compelling than those of today's organizations. Groups of human beings came together to survive, literally, against human enemies and the challenges of nature. The job of the leader was to help the people stay alive. Once that was assured, it was also hoped that he or she would make decisions that allowed life to be reasonably pleasant, that is, free enough from the fear of capture or death, or both, to allow the creation of some sort of family and spiritual life. The tribe would only put its fate in the hands of a chieftain who had proven his worth and fitness to lead. The stakes were too high to trust someone ill-equipped to handle the tasks of leadership. Most often in pre-feudal cultures, leadership was not hereditary. Leaders were chosen on the basis of demonstrated prowess in hunting, in council, in war. Today, most of us are far safer from the threat of starvation or war than were our ancestors. But thousands of years of conditioning don't evaporate within a few hundred years. Gun control, antibiotics, credit cards, and peace accords between major nations don't take away our deeply felt need for worthy chieftains. So when someone who is put in the leader seat doesn't demonstrate the leadership qualities for which human beings have a kind of built-in radar, that person is unlikely to be effective as a leader. If the people are tentative in their acceptance of the leader, if that person doesn't satisfy their leader hunger, they are less likely to offer their commitment and support, and it's more difficult for that person to guide the organization to success. As I thought about these things, I continued to observe my clients and their interactions with one another. Time and again, I watched as people chose their real leaders quietly, without a conscious or verbalized selection process. This is not to say that the process was invisible or arbitrary. It was relatively easy to observe once I started noticing it, and there was definitely a pattern to it. As I began to pull out the key attributes of leadership from the folk tales I was reading, I noticed over and over that people seemed willing to fully accept someone as their leader and commit to being a true member of that person's team only when he or she demonstrated these attributes. Naming the elements. I began to get excited. I felt if I could clarify these archetypal elements and translate them in today's organizational reality, I would have a tool that could be dramatically helpful to people wanting to become more effective leaders, wanting to become a leader that others would follow. After much observation and reflection, I felt I had come to a clear way to describe what I was reading about and understanding. I decided to test out the model with a real-life leader, someone who was not only the designated leader, but to whom others clearly looked as the person who felt like the leader as well. I shared with him what I've just told you, and then I explained the 6 leadership attributes that had emerged in my research as the key components of the leadership archetype. He listened carefully and immediately began to use the model. His first response was, "So Eileen," one of his senior team members, "has the first 3 elements, but I'm not sure about..."